Welcome to the Orlando Sentinel's editorial board interview for Florida's 11th Congressional District, which this is a big district. It starts in the Villages and reaches almost down to Lakeland and takes in Apopka, Ocoee, Claremont, all the Disney properties, but not Universal. It is currently held by Representative Dan Webster, a Republican who was first elected to Congress in 2011, and prior to that, served 28 years in legislature. While Representative Webster declined to meet with us, there are reams of information about him, including his own campaign website and the Sentinel's current and archived coverage of his career. We are meeting today, however, with Barbie Harden Hall, a lawn care company owner, along with her husband, from Mount Dora, who says her political aspirations were inspired by the death of her 2-year-old son, Everett, from a rare disease, and the belief that Webster is not connecting with his constituents. And I'd like to start in on our questioning today with something that people consistently say is the number one issue in congressional races across the country. A majority of Americans in both parties have agreed that the economy is the number one issue. And many of them say that they trust Republicans more than they do Democrats on this particular task. How do you respond to that on here and on the campaign trail?
Yeah, to me, I think that the biggest way to combat that view would be to say over the last several decades, we've had recessions when we've had Republicans in the White House. And I'm, as a member of the working middle class American kind of group, I would say when we talk about trickle-down economics, I've never seen it trickle down to me. And I feel like when we are cutting taxes at the top, when we're benefiting corporations and we're benefiting the ultra wealthy and billionaires, it affects the people at the bottom who are working incredibly hard and never really see that. Like we see right now with the economy, it's booming. We have records that we're setting nearly every week, it seems like, in the stock market. But somebody like me who goes to the grocery store and is just trying to live comfortably with her family, and we work hard, we have a family-owned small business, but we're not really seeing that. And I think it's because a lot of it is corporate price gouging. We see that we're being hit with fees, we're being hit with all of these costs as families and as individuals. And that goes back to when you're cutting at the top, when you're cutting those taxes, when you're doing things to benefit corporations and the ultra wealthy, it never truly trickles down. So I think that the biggest thing for me is we have to address the things that are going to help working and middle class Americans, because that's going to boost up the economy in different ways. We have to help people who want to start small businesses and who literally just want to work hard, but also live their lives comfortably with that work that they do and with their paychecks.
Thank you for that answer. I want to dig a little deeper on that same topic. As you sort of mentioned in passing or in your answer, increasing consumer costs are often cited as a major concern in terms of the economy. Are there specific steps that you would lead Congress to take to give families a break? How would you address that specifically in terms of legislation? And particularly, I'm looking for economic news about housing also, because that remains a massive challenge in Central Florida.
Absolutely. I mean, as my family has seen, last year we saw our homeowners insurance rates nearly quadruple for a home that was only a year old. So I think that our homeowners insurance crisis right now in Florida is really driving up prices, not only for homeowners insurance and property insurance, but we have to address that by just admitting that climate change is real and it's affecting us. And I think that we have so many factors that are leading to us as consumers being affected by all of these prices. And I think that as a mom, when I go to one store and I have eggs and milk nearly double what it is at a different store, and I'm seeing that it's really coming from businesses or corporations, and we're seeing record high profits with some of these. So I think we have to address price gouging. And I think we've started to with our current administration, but we have to tackle it in Congress. We have to make sure that, yeah, we want a free market, we want these things, but we also have to make sure that we're not being taken advantage of as consumers, and making sure that our dollars go a little bit further. And when it comes to essentials, when it comes to the things that we have to have, we really need to be expanding that. Energy costs, we need to be making sure that we're investing in ways that will help lower those energy costs throughout the country, investing in renewable resources that will help bring those costs down for families, and then make sure that we address these corporations coming in and buying up houses and raising the rent that they then pass on to the people, and it passes into entire areas that they're coming through and they're buying up houses for.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up with a question that is another area where Floridians are dealing with very high costs and very difficult access. 11% of Floridians lack health insurance. And I know that this is the issue that is one of those that is dearest to your heart. That's far higher than the national average of 8% uninsured. And that's almost entirely due to Florida leaders' refusal to expand Medicaid to cover low-income working adults. Is it time to allow very low-income Floridians to buy policies in the healthcare marketplace? Or do you believe that Congress should make Medicaid expansion mandatory for states? Or do you see some other opportunities to extend coverage to people who really need it but can't get it?
Absolutely. I think, and I personally know how important this issue is, especially here in Florida. We definitely need to expand Medicaid, and we need to do everything at the federal level to be able to do that, especially for states that unfortunately I feel are using political considerations instead of those for the people. I think that myself, we have a small family-owned business. We use the healthcare marketplace to insure our family. And without that, and when we're talking about and still having a conversation about cutting out Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, and limiting access to that, it's not going to help anybody. And I think that healthcare costs are really, really affecting everyday people in ways that maybe people who have federal or state pension plans or health insurance are not seeing. People that, myself as a mom of a rare disease son, who insurance companies are telling families with their child having fatal conditions that certain treatments are not justified. So I think that addressing the health insurance crisis as well is one of the top at my list, because it affects us all the way down, all different incomes. But I think it's good that we're seeing limiting costs to seniors. I think that we have to do absolutely everything we can at the federal level to make sure that states are not refusing funds for Medicaid expansion, because it affects people. And unfortunately, I feel like it's just a political game at this point.
Thank you for that. Wanted to change gears and talk about space. U.S. spending on space-related programs has skyrocketed, pun intended, with eyes on the prize of a human mission to Mars. But the U.S. Space Force now outspends NASA. First, do you agree with the nation's $70 billion investment in space? And second, do you agree with the so-called militarization of space?
So to me, this is a very important issue, especially here for Central Florida when we're dealing with space. I think at this point, we are seeing costs that are not probably where they need to be. And we've privatized a lot of things, but unfortunately, as taxpayers, we're still funding a lot of things that we probably should not be funding. No, at this point, I do not believe that we should have militarized our Space Force. I think that there should be obviously some focus on that. But at this point, when we have people here in our country that are starving, that are uninsured, we really have to focus on those things. Definitely not expanding those budgets if it's not doing anything for our defense. So to me, if we have, and we're spending these tens of billions of dollars on us, maybe a space race to Mars at this point. But then we have people criticizing funds that we maybe give to Ukraine, which has a direct impact on our own safety and security, as far as making sure that we hold back Putin and Russia. To me, there's no correlation. So we need to make sure that we're using our funds, especially with such high debt limits at this point, to things that are going to directly impact Americans, directly benefit our safety and security. But again, I know that economically it's huge here in Central Florida. So we need to make sure that the funds that we're spending are going towards things that directly impact us as Americans and not passion projects to Mars, where maybe somebody like Elon Musk, who has all of his billions of dollars, can fund that himself.
Thank you so much. And we're going to move on next to a question that is particularly hot for Floridians at just about all levels of government right now. And that is, what congressional action would you support on abortion access? Should Congress enact a national right to privacy and self-determination for health decisions?
Absolutely. I think we need to, at this point, codify Roe v. Wade at the federal level. I think that we are now seeing, and maybe have not seen it fully yet here in Florida, that women's lives are being taken with, unfortunately, preventable conditions. And it's because we put the power back into the hands of states, and we have such extreme laws on the books. So to me, as a woman, as a mom, we have to protect the right to self-determine your own health care, your own family decisions. These are deeply personal and far-reaching decisions that should not be made in Washington, D.C. They should not be made in Tallahassee. They should be with a woman, with her family, whoever she chooses to share that with, between herself, her doctor, her faith. So to me, absolutely, I will do everything I can at the federal level to make sure we are protecting that right. As a woman who has been told before, if you get pregnant again, your life is at risk. If for some reason something happens, I want to make that decision with myself and my family on whether my children should be raised without their mother. My children are all carriers for the same fatal condition that my son suffered from. And they're going to have to rely on IVF with genetic testing of embryos if they choose to have children of their own one day. So the fact that now in 2024, we're even questioning whether we're going to have access to IVF. It's not eugenics. We're not choosing whether we want to have blonde hair, blue-eyed children, which is something that my opponent has said before. Instead, we're choosing to have children that aren't at risk of suffering terrible, horrible deaths at the age of 2. So to me, it's incredibly important we do everything we can at the federal level to protect these very, very important rights of women to make their healthcare decisions.
Thank you for that. I wanted to ask next about climate change, which I know is something that we touched on earlier, but I wanted to dig a little deeper on that. I know there's been so much widespread opposition to all the big measures that might address that. Everything from gas-powered vehicles to energy efficiency standards for manufacturing for home use. Knowing that you can't do everything at once. There's going to be oppositions here and there, and everything's probably going to be piecemeal. What would you prioritize on day one in office if you were elected, in terms of what's the best impact to climate change that you can see in a legislative sense?
I think, simply put, we need people in Congress, we need people in government that can at least admit that climate change is real and that it's affecting lives across the country, but especially here in Florida in District 11. So at the very basic level, let's just all agree that climate change is affecting us, because we can't do anything without first agreeing to that. The fact that climate change has become such a politicized issue is unfortunately, it's horrible for me to think about that. Here we are, growing up in Florida, native Floridian, hurricanes used to be a fun time. Especially here in Central Florida, we didn't have these huge storms. And now it seems like every storm that comes through is a major hurricane. We're having flooding. We're having people's lives devastated. So to me, I think that the best way to deal with this is, because the quickest way is at the state level. We have to use the power of the federal government. We have to use the power that is given to us at the top to work together and to come up with solutions, because we're not just seeing it here in Florida. We're seeing it in California with wildfires. We're seeing it out in the Midwest with tornadoes. Now we're seeing it along the eastern seaboard with these storms. And to me, the biggest thing is we have to put the political games aside. We have to come together as the federal government. We have to come together as states on both sides of the aisle that are in control. And we have to come up with real solutions as to bring all the stakeholders to the table. Let's bring the insurance industry. Let's bring builders and say, what are the best ways that we can address these issues, whether it's building codes, whether it's updated, structures or things that we can do along the coastline. But we're not getting anything solved by making this into a political issue and working on it piecemeal, or considering it, oh, well, we can't do this because then it's a win for the other side. We're all losing at this point. So to me, the biggest thing is, let's bring the stakeholders to the table. Let's use the power that we have as Congress to bring people to that table, including our state governments. And let's really get in and figure out what are the quickest, what are the best ways that we can address this issue for people and for our businesses, and actually really tackle the problem instead of ignoring that it's even an issue.
I wanted to sneak in a very quick follow-up to one particular facet of that. And it's something that at one point Congress seemed very close to passing, but it has since fallen off the national radar. That, as you noted, we are now seeing impacts of natural disasters across the country: flooding, droughts, fires, windstorms, earthquakes, mudslides, all kinds of different impacts. Do you think it's time for a national catastrophic fund that would help spread the risk for insurers and for Americans across the entire nation?
I definitely think it's time we have that conversation. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert at all in homeowners insurance and the effects that something like that would have widespread and on individual families. But I think at this point, because we're seeing all of these major natural disasters across the country, that we have to have the conversation. We have to do the research into whether that's the next best step. I've even done some research into and heard about using some of these FEMA funds, and instead of coming in at the tail end and giving these funds, what can we do with those funds before these issues happen, and the investment and going towards insurance costs in these areas that we're seeing repeated issues with, and how can we address that before it happens. And so I think it's a conversation that we have to have, but I believe that we have to come together and we compromise on it, because if we have us, one side of the aisle saying, absolutely, this is what we have to do and this is how we have to do it, and then we have the other side saying, no, we're never going to agree to this, we're never going to come to the table, we're seeing what we are now. Nothing is getting done, nothing is getting addressed. So the best way to do it is to come together and have those conversations and not focus on, will this be a win or a loss for my party? Instead, we have to consider it, what is going to be best for the people, what is going to be best for the government? Because again, we're coming in with these FEMA funds and we're bailing out people all over the country for, again, wildfires, flooding, drought, tornadoes. What can we use those funds for? Is the best use of those funds, is the best use of some of those funds than to invest it in catastrophic insurance nationwide?
Thank you. And we could keep you here all day asking questions because there is a whole country's worth of issues, really. But I did have one more to touch on that is another hot button issue in this race nationwide, and definitely here in Central Florida, we are seeing outsized impacts from this, and that is immigration policies. These also provide a really stark contrast between the two parties, at least in the minds of American people who don't really want to hear that the Biden administration has pretty much tracked the Trump administration in terms of enforcement of these policies, including the asylum rules. So despite the fact that there isn't really a huge difference between the two parties, Democrats are consistently accused of being soft on immigration and even wanting open borders. Is it time to lean into that and reform immigration policies to be more welcoming?
I think that, yes, we've gotten this idea that we are very differing in our concerns as far as parties go, but I think that is unfortunately not true. We want a safe and secure border, but we also want to make sure that people that are coming here, that are seeking asylum, that they are treated with dignity when that happens. And I think that unfortunately, we have seen one side of the aisle talk about building a border wall and Trump's wall and everything else. That is not going to solve this issue. We're going to be spending billions of dollars, and it's not going to deal with the immediate concerns that we have. We need to expand the technology that we're using at the border. We need to expand the personnel that we have at the border. We need to make sure that we are addressing asylum claimants by expanding our judges, the administration, personnel, and making sure that we are bringing these people and processing them more quickly so that we're not dealing with a years-long process. But I think that people that are immigrating here should not be treated like criminals, that we should be allowing those people to come here if they want to work, if they want to participate in our economy. And the fact that we have such a hard process to come here legally, it's not helping the situation any as well. So we need to make sure that we're processing work visas. We're allowing people to come here. Here in District 11, we rely so much on our farm workers. We rely so much on our agriculture. And unfortunately, a lot of them, rely on not locals. We're relying on people from outside our country to come here and work those fields and those farms. And we need to make sure that we're allowing that to happen. And the people that are here and already contributing to our economy and our culture and communities, that we're not treating them like criminals. And unfortunately, I've seen it a lot here in the district, especially a place like Apopka, where the, indoor foliage capital of the world, and we rely so much on these workers. Let's embrace that. And yes, let's fix the border. Let's fix our immigration policies. But then the people that are here and contributing to us, let's not treat them like outsiders.
Thank you so much. Before we go to your closing statement, I wanted to remind our viewers that the Sentinel will be making an endorsement in this race, but we don't expect you to just take our word for it. We urge you to take a look at both candidates in this race. In addition to our excellent news coverage, both of them have websites, social media presences. There are still a few appearances that both of them seem to be planning to make. So take a look, decide who best represents your views and your values as a voter in this district. And most importantly, remember that you need to vote on November 5th or before. You can vote early, you can vote via mail ballot, and you can also vote in person at the polls. So with that, I'd like to ask you to give us your best pitch as to why voters in this Republican-leaning district should maybe take a chance and elect you.
Yeah, to me, I think the most important push I can have is I actually want to work for the district. I actually want to be out there with the people, with the constituents, and hearing your issues. Unfortunately, we have somebody who's been probably in office too long, has passed one piece of legislation in his 14 years in Congress, has a high missed voting record, and just I think it's time that we move on. I know personally what it's like to go to your representative and say, I see these issues, I see things that we need to improve on. And I, as a representative, would know what it takes for somebody to come to you and ask for help. I think that no matter what party you belong to, your voice is valued and should be respected, whether you're a different party than me, whether I agree with what you're saying. We have to have somebody that's going to value your opinion no matter what. And I think to reference the endorsement that was given before, it was because Webster, all the funds that Mr. Webster had brought back to the district, which I think is great. But when we look at somebody like Maxwell Frost, who is in the next district over and has only been there for not even 2 years yet, the funds that he brought back to his district are right there on par. And unfortunately, when it comes to the actual people, when it comes to the constituents, we're not seeing the work getting done. We're not seeing the effort put in. So at the very basics of things, I want to be out there and make a change for this district and make sure that we're doing the things that are going to help us as a whole, from the villages in Sumter County all the way down to our workers at Disney World and that live in Lake County and live in that West Orange County. I want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to protect these rural areas, to protect these protected areas that really contribute to our beautiful landscape here. I was born and raised right here in Lake County. And so to me, all of this is incredibly and deeply personal. And no matter what happens, I'm going to work for everybody in the district, no matter what, and work to make sure that you're valued and respected and that we get back to work here in the district.
Thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck, and we'll look forward to seeing what happens on November 5th.